Deputy Provost William Buchanan.
Yeah, thank you for that. Any other, no other, everyone else is accounted for, so no further apologies. Any declarations of interest? John? Pardon?
Yeah, I'm here, convener.
You indicated you want to speak. But
No, sorry, I don't need to speak.
okay,
No.
it was just that the notification came up, popped up on the screen. Okay, no declaration of interest. Planning Review Committee procedures. I'll ask Donald to explain the procedures to members.
I'll go through it's Douglas, convener.
Right.
I'll go through the procedures briefly. They're in your papers, but just to quickly summarise the main headlines, this is a review of an appointed officer's decision. So this comes before the Planning Review Committee, the applicant having submitted the review, and this one does date back to almost a year, I think, or just over a year. So due to the pandemic, this is the first occasion we've had a chance for the committee to consider it. So the first thing the committee has to assess is whether the papers that they have in front of them today are sufficient to make a decision. And having done that, and having heard the planning advisor give a summary as well, they have to determine whether there's enough information there, or whether they need to seek further information by way of further procedure. Now, there are three choices available to the committee. They can ask for further written submissions. We could potentially have a hearing, and we could potentially have a site inspection. Now, the latter two would obviously have to be aware of the current restrictions that are in place due to the COVID-19 constraints. So, if the committee can bear that in mind. As with all planning decisions that come before members, this is no different. It's in effect a de novo decision. So the committee has to consider the papers, assess the relevant policies. The application has to be assessed against the development plan, and in accordance with that, unless there are material considerations. So the committee, as with every planning decision that they make, have to assess the policies, weigh them up, make a balanced judgment, and make a decision on the basis of that information. So I think I'll leave it at that, convener. But if there's any other questions on the procedures, I can certainly help with that.
Okay. Thanks very much for that, Douglas. Donald, do you want to add anything?
Yes. Well, what I'll do, convener, is I'll give a summary of the application, of the report on handling by the appointed officer, and also a summary of the request for the review. It's all in the papers before you. I'll just point out that as the advisor to the committee, I've had no involvement in this application up until this point, so I'm completely impartial on this. So the application that's before the review committee today is for the subdivision of the garden ground and erection of a single dwelling house and domestic garage at 6 Thistle Avenue, Grangemouth. The application also includes the change of use of a strip of open space to the rear of the property, which actually backs onto the motorway at that point. So it's a large detached dwelling house, 4 bedrooms, a fairly modest design. It's sat at an angle behind the existing property, for which we would call the donor property at the Thistle Avenue. A new access is proposed to serve the dwelling house onto Thistle Avenue. In terms of site history, there was a previous application for the same site that was for 2 dwelling houses, and this was previously considered by the planning committee in 2019. It was refused by the planning committee in line with the officer's recommendation at that time, for very similar reasons for the refusal of this current application. In terms of consultations, there was no great issues arising from the consultation process on there, although the proposal and the previous proposal has generated quite a bit of interest in the immediate area from the residents in Thistle Avenue. It's fair to say there was no letters of support, there were all objections, a lot of them very articulate, I have to say. The 10 objections, the objections are summarised in the report on handling, and I'll just point out that's starting at page 39 of the papers for your information. It refers to the lack of adequate drainage, a history of flooding on the site, issues with access and congestion in the area, air quality, increased traffic, loss of privacy, being out of keeping with character of the area as well, loss of view, and the possibility of safety with cars coming off the adjacent motorway. In terms of the development plan, having looked at the papers, I think the appointed officer has correctly identified the policies at the time that this was refused under delegated powers. But what I would point out, as Douglas has mentioned previously, with the passage of time, a lot of things have moved on, and one of the things that has moved on is that we now have a new development plan, which is LDP2. So the policies that are referred to in the report and in the reason for refusal have now been superseded with the policies in the LDP2. And just to clarify, we've got SGO5, infill development and subdivision of plots, in the previous development plan. That is now HC06 of LDP2. LDP2 was adopted in August last year. We've got windfall housing, which was previously SHG03, which is now HC02 in LDP2, and protection of open space was INF03, is now PE16 of LDP2. Now, I'm just pointing these out, but the policies are very, very similar to the previous ones, but these would be the most up-to-date policies, and also the supplementary guidance was updated in December of last year. In terms of the material considerations, again, the appointed officer has considered that, I think, fully considered them. Coal mining legacy, assessment of public representations, and at that time there was mention of LDP2, saying it was coming along and there was no substantial differences between that and the earlier plan. So basically, in the assessment of it, I think the infill development and subdivision of plots is really the key consideration in this one, and basically, I think the consideration that was given was that the design and layout and character of the proposed dwelling house was out of keeping with the area. The report on handling goes on to assess the representations. I think it's quite a detailed assessment there, and I think it's identified the ones which are material and planning terms and those which are not, such as loss of view. So wrapping it all up, the appointed officer and the agreed delegated report refers to the backland nature of the development. Just for members' information, there's no definition in the previous and existing local development plans about what backland development, but a sort of a working definition would basically be a dwelling house which would be directly behind and facing onto an eastern dwelling house. So rather than your traditional back-to-back housing, it would be a back-to-front, if you like. So the refusal reasons, there are two. One is that it's contrary to SHG05 of the development plan, which would now be the irrelevant policy in LDP2, and also there was issues that the applicant hadn't provided a noise assessment, which our colleagues in environmental protection had requested. The appointed officer, as he had requested it a number of times in the course of the assessment of the application, but it wasn't forthcoming right at the last gasp. It looked like the applicant's agent had said that they would commission one. but the decision was taken not to extend the determination period, and the application was subsequently refused under delegated powers. So following that refusal, there was a request for review, and that these are on pages 8 to 20 of the papers before you. It's quite a detailed submission. I'll try and summarise it as best as I can. Unsurprisingly, the requester of review does not agree with the decision, and takes the view that this proposed dwelling house and garage would be in keeping with the area. It wouldn't have any issues in relation to privacy. Also, the review request also refers to the character, the well-established character of the surrounding residential area, and there are a number of photographs attached to that, which members may have a look at there, which the requester of the review is using as an argument in favour of the application. They're also within the request for the review. The members may note that there's a reference to an appeal decision which was granted planning permission. Just for your information, it's on page 15. I don't think in the papers it specifies what that appeal decision related to, but it was actually an application for housing very close to the Forth Valley Royal Hospital, and that was granted on appeal in 2019. At that time, and the request of review seems to attach some weight to that, saying that at that time there was issues in relation to the housing land supply. My understanding with the adoption of LDP2, the housing land supply in the Falkirk area is fairly healthy, and also I would say that, you know, a single dwelling house would be a very modest contribution to the housing land supply there. Yeah, I think basically in summary, the requester of review is suggesting that this proposed dwelling house is in keeping with the area. They also suggest that if a noise impact assessment is required, that could be included in a subsequent application. I would just advise members that, in my opinion, that if members were minded to grant this application, I think that a noise impact assessment would require to be provided up front prior to an approval. There could be an issue that if members were minded to grant this, subject to a condition of a noise impact assessment, the findings of the noise impact assessment might not be that favourable towards the proposal. So I think that would have to be, rather than put to a future date, it would have to be put up front. I think that's all I've got to say just now, other than that from the time that the application was determined under delegated powers, it seems that the circumstances on the site have actually changed, and members might have been copied into a number of emails earlier this week. There's a suggestion that the site is now being used, it would appear to be as either a storage or a builder's yard with a commercial nature. Just for your information, that's been referred on to our planning enforcement officer, who will investigate that separately from this process. Also, I would say to members that I took the opportunity to have a drive by the site. The site has been fenced off at the front, so you can't actually view the site from a public area. It is possible to have a glimpse of the site when travelling along the adjacent motorway, but that's perhaps not the safest thing in the world. So just pointing out to members that the situation on site does seem to have changed since the application was determined by the appointed officer. Thank you, convener. Thank you, members.
Okay, thanks for that, Donald. We have to take a decision whether we believe there is sufficient information to make a decision this morning with the evidence that's before us today, or if, for example, you're looking for site inspection, it's not available at the moment, but it doesn't stop individuals from checking the site out themselves, although the last piece of Donald's evidence is that we can't see the site. I certainly feel that we've got sufficient information with regards to this application, but if other members feel differently, then I'm quite happy to accept the views of the majority, obviously. Can I ask, put it to the floor and ask if there's any questions? How do you feel about having sufficient evidence today to take a decision, or do you want any further information? James?
Thanks, convener. I don't know if this will be for Douglas or Donald. When Donald mentioned air pollution information, could we ask for that first before we make a decision on this? Because I wouldn't like to make a decision, and if it was favourable and that came back and it was negative, then you're saying to say, well, we've gave this and it's been negative, and it just makes a mockery of how I think that our decision, eh?
Ask Donald for his opinion on that. Donald?
Yes, convener, it was in relation to noise impact assessment, Councillor Kerr, which was actually the second reason for refusal under delegated powers, which states the proposal fails to adequately address potential noise impacts from transportation within the proposed properties. That should actually be singular, to the potential detriment of residential amenity levels. The proposal is contrary to the terms of the policy HSG03 of the Falkirk Local Development Plan as it was at that time. So the point I was trying to make was that the requester of the review is saying basically that they think this could be conditioned. Personally, along the lines you're saying, Councillor, that I think if it was conditioned, then the impact assessment came back and said it was unsatisfactory, you know, there would be an element of having sold the shirts.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's about as eloquently as I can put that.
Yeah.
Apologies.
Yeah. Anyone else? Councillor Bowes and Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, convener. I agree, and I think it's actually the applicant who's supposed to put in the sound, which I think Donald had actually referred to, that he thought he was almost going to get it, but it didn't quite materialise. I'm also looking at it from the flood risk side of things. There seems to be quite a lot of information here about the ground flooding on a regular basis. So I think there's probably enough here to go forward. I said David agrees with that, but it could end up being a 50-50, but that's other people's opinions on it. So yeah, I think there's enough information to go forward.
How do the members feel? Councillor Murtough?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say something fairly similar to Councillor Bowes, but I think that there is sufficient information here. I just wanted to clarify though with Donald there, because obviously it's important we consider what the applicant is saying in fullness and in full, information disclosure. So if we put a condition on that said, if everything else was satisfactory, which we haven't obviously gone through, and we wanted to put a noise condition on, that was basically if it fails a noise, if the current if whatever the developer proposes and that can't be overcome fails noise impact assessment, then planning permission would be refused. I think that's probably what they're suggesting, that they would feel they would be able to submit evidence, but submit a design that would be. So if there was a condition which said we put a noise impact assessment, it has to pass it, or it doesn't get planning permission, is that a competent thing to do? I mean, I know what you're saying about the selling the jerseys and the kind of, from enforceability, and presumably they wouldn't get permission, they wouldn't get a building warrant, all the rest of it to even begin work. It's not like they'd build it and then we'd test it type thing. They'd have to submit it as part of that final design. But that beggars the question of why is it not already there if it's going to have to be done anyway. But I just want to double check so we're sure we're covering that base completely.
Douglas or Donald, which would answer that particular question?
Yes, I mean, we're using the selling the jerseys analogy here, but it is, I think it's fairly fundamental to the assessment and determination of the application. And as advisory committee, I would not feel comfortable having that on as a condition of a planning of any planning permission. It would be, if members were minded to grant, I would suggest it should be minded to grant subject to the submission of a satisfactory noise impact assessment, which our colleagues in environmental protection would provide us detailed advice on.
Can I just clarify, Donald, just for through your convener, that and I would agree and take that advice on board, but just so that we've got context, can you ever recall that being a planning condition? I know we obviously are assessing everything on its merits, but just for context, that be a planning condition in the past for any things that you know about off the top of your head?
Not that I can recall. That's not to say it's never been done, but I can't recall anything like that. Because as members will be aware, we trot things out quite regularly at planning committee and review boards, although we've not had a review board, bar the one recently, for quite some time. Is that every planning condition has to pass a number of tests. One is enforceability, one is reasonableness related to planning and related to the application that's before you. And I would have concerns about whether a condition require a noise impact assessment in this instance would satisfy these tests.
Thank you.
Can I ask in terms of the fact that the scale of the development, we're talking about one house, the normal practice to seek this level of detail as to how we record, I would argue, bigger issues, bigger applications in terms of noise.
I think, convener, in this particular instance, given the location of the application site, which is sandwiched between the existing dwelling house and dwelling houses on Thistle Avenue in Grangemouth and the adjacent motorway, noise is quite an important factor in this particular one. It might not be such a factor on a development, for example, in a more rural area or an area where it's not there. I mean, it would be open to members if you were minded to grant this. It's just to do away with the requirement, but the advice from our colleagues in environmental protection was that this was required, and also, as I mentioned earlier, there was a previous application on the site for 2 dwelling houses refused at planning committee in 2019 for basically the same reasons as this current one was refused under delegated powers, including the provision of a noise impact assessment.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Anyone else? James?
Through yourself, convener, I just think it would have been handy to get a visit on the site. Like Donald, I finished work at back at 9 last night, and I went down and drove past to see if I could see it. And I know it's night time, but just to get a lay of the land, and there is a fence here, so I'd never seen much. I would have liked to have went round the back to see the flooding, because the flooding is mentioned by the objectors on many occasions. It would have been nice to have got that visual on the site.
Can I ask for Donald's opinion on the flooding issue?
Well, as with Councillor Kerr, I think we're kind of singing for the same song sheet on this one. Is that I would personally, there is a number of mentions of flooding in the objections. There's also, I think, a suggestion that since the application was determined, the flooding issues have got even worse with the laying down of type 1 material, I think has been referred to on that. But without actually getting in to see the site and the surrounding areas, it's kind of difficult to come to a view on that, convener.
Okay. Anyone else? Councillor Bowes?
Donald, there's intimations that there's a potential other building site on there. Was there anything done? And I know it's a different application, but I'm just trying to see if there was maybe some information from that could have maybe actually helped us, because if it's a bigger site, it would have probably, SEPA would have probably been asked to check to see if it was.
Councillor Bowes, I noticed in the requester's submission there is reference to another proposal for additional housing. I've checked the system. We don't have any, certainly no planning applications. I can't find any pre-application discussions. So I'm not aware of anything that's in the off. And also in terms of SEPA consultations, this single house application falls below the threshold for consulting with SEPA. They do have standing advice, but members may be aware that they had a catastrophic cyber attack just before Christmas, and basically SEPA are really struggling throughout the whole country in terms of dealing with any planning applications. So even on the larger applications that we have and other planning authorities have, is that SEPA are unable for the time being to actually respond to these. But no, in short, no, I'm not aware of any other proposals. It might be aspirational on behalf of the current requester of review, or perhaps a third party, but I've got no knowledge and can find nothing on our system in relation to that.
Okay, the pages 18 and 19, photographs. There's a fair selection of designs within the existing estate. But design was one of the reasons that there was a refusal. Can you give an opinion, Donald, with regards to the different types of property?
Yes, convener. I mean, it's what did you say? Page 18.
Page 18 and 19.
Yep, got
Index
those.
one.
Yes, these have all been taken. It looks as in Thistle Avenue, and when I had a look by, there are a variety of styles in the area. The majority of them, from what I could see, were story, 2-story, story and a half. A lot of them single story to eave site with first floor accommodation. Some with dormers. So that there is. I mean, it's an area that's a well-established residential amenity and character. There are a variety of styles. My own view is that the actual design of the house that's proposed would not particularly jar with the established character of the area. It's more about whether the house in that location, as proposed, is acceptable or not. And as the appointed officer has done in the report, it was refused due to the backland nature of the development fails to respect the well-established building lines and pattern of development. So it's more to do with the established character of that area. The building lines are referred to rather than the actual design of the dwelling house.
Right. Yeah, fair enough. The design would really have to be part of the consideration, though, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would be part of the consideration, convener. Just from my point of view, the actual design of the dwelling house is not a particular issue. It's more the position of it and the character of the area, as the appointed officer has stated in the agreed report.
Apologies. Councillor Bowes.
Thank you, convener. I think the design is quite important on this one. There is a layout drawing on page 37, which actually shows you the plot itself and how the house sits off at an angle. And if you then look at the elevations of it, the wider elevations are north and south, which you've got an upper floor, you've got a good degree of windows in it, And then if you go back to page 35, where and actually refer that to the houses next, the people in 4 and 2 are going to have there's going to be quite a direct overlook right into their back gardens from this one. Could argue that there is some from 21, but that goes in one direction. The house is actually going to angle directly at the back of their houses. There'll be a slight on the other side, but I think more I would be concerned about number 2 and number 4. And again, it's going between page 35 and 37. If you'll see where I'm going with it. So you've got, what does it say? You come in off the road. It comes down between the houses. It then goes into the major car parking area. There's a garage to the left, and that's absolutely fine. But the house sits there. You've got to remember that's 2-storey. So that 2-storey house at that angle will look over comfortably number 2 and 4. I would have said if it had been square, it may have been harder to see directly over, but by actually angling it, you're actually putting it so that people, without having to open a window and look out, will see directly over the gardens of number 2 and number 4. Just my opinion is, I'm trying to, maybe you can, I don't really agree with me or not, but I'm a wee bit concerned about that.
Yep. Just for the clarification, when I was talking about the design of the house, I was talking about the sort of the bricks and mortar design rather than any impact on either what we call the donor property or number 6 or any of the adjacent ones. You'll see from the reason of refusal that it was stated that there would be a privacy impact on number 6, which is the donor property.
I think also that, I think I would add to that, the 4 and 2 would probably have very similar, especially from the upper floors.
Let's have a fair kick about, members. Sorry, James.
Thanks, Convener. On page 20, pardon me, Convener, there's a map. Was this provided by the applicant, Donald?
But I'll just check. Yes.
Yes. So 21 Primrose Road. Is that a background development? As in, would that continue along like a path along?
It looks like,
It looks as if it's at the back of houses.
I have not seen that on site, councillor. It does look like Primrose. It looks like it's a continuation of the dwelling houses on Primrose Avenue. It doesn't look like it's sitting directly behind and looking on to an existing dwelling house, but without having seen that on site, I can't really qualify that much more than that.
Okay, the members have any further questions or points or opinions?
Councillor Murtagh.
Councillor Murtagh?
Thanks, Convener. I mean, I'm actually, because also we can't go to the site, but you get a really good view if you go into the Google map in terms of, and actually it does say it's 2021 that the latest images have been taken, so maybe that gives a little bit. You can see really clearly the kind of industrial kind of element at the back, the hard standing, as it were, and the debris that's around it, and the relation to what's round the corner at Primrose Avenue, which I'm happy to share screen if that's permitted to sort of explain what I'm saying. But so when Councillor Bowes was talking there, I was trying to kind of orientate how that would be in terms of, I agree, the 2-storey looking onto the donor property, as it were, at an angle, it's one thing. I don't think it's actually that bad when it comes to the next door. Just when you look at it on the kind of aerial view, and then as well, what's quite useful is that you can kind of see it a little bit in terms of the 3D the perspective of the overall layout. I think it is quite useful because you can see the proximity is true that around the corner at Primrose, it looks more, James, like a garage right at the back of that, and then there's some trees that do screen that, and that from the shadows they do look particularly tall. So I think actually from an overlooking into position, it's not as bad as it could be, and it is indeed not as close to the motorway as the site round at Primrose, but that doesn't mean that the site at Primrose isn't well insulated in terms of the noise impact that they've got. So I still think that point stands, but it's not a reason in and of itself. I think that it is quite important in the context of the overall site to see that the area at the back of that, the other gardens are, the other areas, they're, on Thistle Avenue are green spaced behind, but this isn't. This is some form of yard there. I don't know that, I think that flood, the impact on drainage would be a concern, because you are adding something on that area that, without, I wouldn't just want a noise impact assessment. I want some sort of drainage. It's not so much flooding from a SEPA point of view from that sense, but how will this impact in terms of the drainage infrastructure? So, but I don't know. Are we allowed to share what or can we put as additional information permissible in the?
Additional information, yeah, I would think so. In fact, I'm sure Donald Douglas,
I think it would be acceptable if you can, to share your screen,
Okay.
Councillor Murtaugh.
So, can you see that then?
Yep.
Right. So, basically, this area here, I don't know if you're seeing my cursor, but you can see the area at the back, and that says it's 2021. So the additional material that's there and how that it's different in character, and the proposed house would be in this kind of area, facing in this, towards this area, towards where it says Baberton Daisy, and you can see that it is, obviously it would be not as close to the motorway, which is here, and I think, as you say, Councillor Bryce, if it's facing in that kind of direction towards Baberton Daisy, then there's definitely an element of looking particularly over this area at the number 6 in the donor property, but maybe not so much into this area. And I do think there's pretty mature trees, as it looks like from the Primrose Avenue side. I don't know if I stop sharing and then share. There's another view.
Technology is definitely making things better.
So if I share this one, you see that? So that,
Yep.
So if you're looking from, over, you can see obviously the motorway, and then behind it the industrial areas there, but you can kind of see the perspective that if you're going along and round, this area is that, different in character in terms of what's there. It's not that the drainage, it's not like it is hard standing, it would appear. It's not like it's grassed and soaking up the water as it is. So I think that's probably an important context as well. And I think it's kind of useful to have. I mean, that bit there is where it goes under the motorway, that tunnels for people who kind of know that area a wee bit. But yeah, I think that's the overall, the footprint in comparison to the other properties. But it's clear this is a very different in character space behind than what the other properties were, which kind of probably is significant, but doesn't necessarily answer what the impact on drainage would be. And again, I would think that this other property around the Primrose is closer. Don't know the context of the sound assessment for and the materials in that case. So I just wanted to share that from the way that I was kind of thinking about what's been presented in the papers and how to view that context. So if that's helpful or not.
Fair enough. Okay, anyone else? James?
Thanks, Convener. By the way, that was very, very helpful, I thought. Very helpful. So thanks, Laura. I think what Gary was trying to say was that it would look into 2 and 4, but we didn't get that with the height, with it being a double story for the visual impact for them. But it looks as if it looked for that it wouldn't have an effect on it. I don't know if Donald can answer this question. See, because it's probably a key question about flooding. See where if it was granted and they built their house, would that impact on flooding? Or with them having more drainage in, would it help the flooding?
That's a difficult one to answer.
I only do difficult questions, Donald.
Thank you. Without having more information, it's difficult to answer. The flooding wasn't seen as being a key consideration in the determination of the application, but it has been raised. It was raised during the application by objectors. None of the consultees came back, including our own roads and flooding people, with any concerns about it. But I see from the objection letters that there is substantial concern in the area about flooding, and also the instances of flooding getting worse over recent years. I think there's a suggestion in some of the objections that the laying down of the hardcore on the application site may well have exacerbated flooding. I think there's also a suggestion that the flooding in this area might have been it's getting worse due to insufficient drainage on the adjacent motorway. But I don't have enough information really to give you a yes or no answer on that, I'm afraid.
Yeah, right, more of the noise.
A bit of a classic answer, I suppose.
Yeah, really the noise. He doesn't want a pay cut. The seems to be the what was given most attention and the precedents established was with the noise measuring rather than the flooding issue. Anyone else?
Convener, I just probably like yourself and the other 2 members. We take the nicest of what the objectors are saying, but we've not got the impact it does on people's lives and people's hearts if that development is taken forward, and we can only take it on what facts we've got, and it doesn't matter what decision we make, it'll be somebody will not be pleased. That'll do the new to discuss anything else. Thanks.
Does anyone else have anything for the officers or for colleagues? Right. Okay.
Conveners, sorry. I'm very much sort of focusing on. Well, we're looking at the application, but it's obviously the reasons for refusal, and that's. That the conversation has been good, because I think that's actually what a lot of that is we've covered, as well as I appreciate we've covered the flooding side. I'm finding it difficult to overturn the reasons for refusal. Is that the right word for it?
You're rejecting the appeal.
At the moment, I've not heard anything that overturns the refusal, the refusal recommendations at this moment in time.
Yeah, so are you moving that accordingly?
Yes, I will move that formally.
Okay, anyone otherwise minded?
I would go the other way, convener. I would like to uphold the appeal.
Okay, does that have a second? Or it doesn't need a second, does it?
Is there a-
Others.
Is there a seconder for Councillor Bows's motion, convener?
Yes, I'll second it.
Could I just clarify then, Councillor Bowes, that's you're content with the report and handling and the officer's recommendations for refusal?
From what I can see, and I can't see any reason to overturn the refusal reasons.
And that's been seconded by Councillor Alexander. There's an amendment from Councillor Kerr.
Yeah.
Does that require a seconder?
No.
Or is straight to the division because it's been a division?
Well, is there a seconder for Councillor Kerr's amendment?
Well, that's what I'm trying to establish. Do we need it as per standing orders?
That does need a seconder,
Right,
convener.
okay.
Yeah, well, that puts me in a really awkward position, doesn't it? Do you know, I'm going to be honest, I'm still thinking about it. You know, I say this before in planning, when we're in committee, that quite often what I feel is lacking is thinking time where we can really weigh things up, because I'm still looking at the plans and kind of thinking the context of what's been said this morning. Obviously, it adds to what we've looked at previously in the papers, and it's not as clear cut as what I had thought coming into the committee, given the context of things. I think it is actually a very difficult situation because of the way they cite, and I don't know. I actually don't know that. I think it's pretty knife edge, to be honest.
Okay, can we get some clarification? Again, I don't know if it's Douglas or Donald, but the procedure that we have today, I mean, I'm very wary about using a cast and vote, for example,
Yeah.
with a committee of 4.
Yeah.
I think that's just too weighted in one level. The Councillor Murdoch is clearly having dilemmas in relation to this application. I don't think the application or the reasons for refusing was clear cut as I believe they would be, but they didn't move far enough for me in terms of how far they did move towards the approval. But it was close. It was very close. Is there any way we can continue this matter? I know it goes against the belief that we had sufficient information at the beginning of the process to determine the process, determine the outcome. But it's very clear that there are areas of doubt.
Convener, could we ask officers to just go back to on page 13, the actual reasons for refusal? Could we just have a summary of them again? I'm just looking at the policy SGO5, the infrastructure development subdivision plot, and just to clarify the original decision reasons for refusal again, just so it's fresh in our mind before we decide to continue or not.
Okay, Donald.
Yep, sure. What page are you referring to, Councillor Murtagh?
On page 13, the local review statement, where it's got this statement relates to refusal of planning permission for the reasons, and then it's got the 1 and 2. Just from the point of view that those were the original reasons, and obviously it's up. We've updated the guidance, and we're, as I understood it, we're considering this application as if we were considering everything again, and with the context of that, but we were looking at all the evidence again, which is why we can bring in the other stuff. But just to clarify, those original reasons for refusal and your opinion about whether that on the new policy has been overcome, or just to restate what you said at the beginning, so it's clear before we make a decision.
Yep, certainly, Councillor. The page 13 is what the requester of the review has quoted as the refusal reasons. The actual refusal notice is on page 44. So just for the avoidance of doubt, I'm looking at page 44,
Okay.
just in case there's been something misquoted in the request for the review. So reason one is the backland nature of the development proposed fails to respect the well-established building lines and pattern of development within the surrounding area, and would result in the unacceptable erosion of privacy within the rear garden ground of the donor property, which is number 6 Thistle Avenue, to the detriment of townscape character and residential amenity. The proposal is contrary to policy SG05, infill development and subdivision of plots of the Falkirk Local Development Plan, and Falkirk Council Supplementary Guidance SG02 Neighbourhood Design. Now, what I said earlier on is that since that was refused by the appointed officer, we now have LDP2. So LDP2, the relevant policy is HC06, which is, again, the infill development and subdivision of plots. There are some minor differences in wording, but principally it's the same policy. So I would say, in my opinion, that would apply equally as of now. The supplementary guidance SG02, but that really relates, in truth, that relates to larger developments in this, but it is applicable. And SCO2 was updated in December 2020 there, so that would still apply. Now, the second reason, the proposal fails to adequately address potential noise impacts from transportation within the proposed properties. Now, as I say, that should actually be singular. I think that might be a hangover from the previous refusal for 2 dwelling houses on this site, to the potential detriment of residential amenity levels. The proposal is contrary to the terms of policy SG03, windfall housing of the Falkirk Local Development Plan. So, as of now, policy SG03 would be replaced by policy HC02 of LDP2. Maybe some slight tweaks in terms of wording, but fundamentally the same policy.
Okay. Basically, the first reason, I'm actually, I think on all the points on that, I actually disagree with the thing. The problem that I still have is on the second point, given that we don't have a noise impact assessment, and given what you said earlier about the difficulty in imposing that as a condition and meeting the tests for a condition, I think that is the one salient, that's the one remaining point that I don't think can be overcome, even withstanding that, having had a good look at the context of the other one. So I'm afraid, James, I'm probably going to not second your motion, because I think that the noise element, if we had that information, and I think it should have been submitted as part of that, and it should have been a part of it and not a condition we can put, I think I'm probably content with the view of the mover and the seconder.
My amendment was, I never got to finish it, was uphold the appeal subject to a noise assessment being carried out successfully, and if it's detriment to the area or what it requires, then it's refused.
We had that as a question earlier on, and Donald gave advice to the committee that wasn't a good solution to a problem. Donald, do you stand by that?
Yeah, just for clarification, convener, my concern was if members were minded to grant this, that they would want a condition requiring a noise impact assessment as part of the grant of the permission. But if members were minded to grant it, I think it would be appropriate to say this is a minded to grant decision subject to the submission assessment of a satisfactory noise impact assessment, which I say we would consult with our colleagues in environmental protection on that, because obviously it's quite a specialist area.
Yeah.
If there's a rejection of the proposals, what options does the applicant have
None.
with regards to seeking recourse?
Convener, if this this is it really for this application. So unless there's an appeal on there's no formal appeal of the merits of the decision from this from the Planning Review Committee. There are appeals on grounds of an ethical question or a lack of adherence to the procedures, but there's no further appeal of the decision from this forum.
Okay, well, what we have is a mover and a seconder to reject the application, and that's all we have at the moment.
I think, if Donald's advice was different, I would agree with James that, but if it's not enforceable if we're not confident that in placing that as an enforceable condition and that it could actually be achieved, then I'm not comfortable granting it. But I would otherwise think that. But I come back to that. Although there's no appeal from this, there is the opportunity to resubmit a planning application, which I realise from the applicant's point of view isn't ideal. But at the same time, it's such a material, important aspect of this planning application that there is a noise assessment given its location, that why would it not be submitted?
Right, fair enough. Well, these are reasonable grounds. Councillor Bowes?
Yeah, can I just, and so that everybody understands, and I appreciate what Laura did with the Google Maps, and I disagree. I still think the angle the house is at will look over number 4, Scarden, as well as number 3, although this item 1 is basically talking about number 6. I think it will also look over number 4, especially at the two floor level. So that's why I'm saying that number 1 still stands. And I agree totally on what's been said on the second one. So I really can't, and I appreciate it's all about perceptions and how we see it. I just don't think there's been enough here to tell me that the reasons, as I've said already, that have been set out by the planning officers have been mitigated. I just don't see it at all.
I understand that, and that's the basis of your motion, which at the moment is as a seconder, and it's the only motion as a seconder, no amendment that has come forward. So what's the procedure for recording that?
That's the substantive motion, convener. There's no contrary amendment as things stand. So, right. Just to clarify, we can tease out the various reasons that the members have given respectively in terms of the refusal reasons, and they can be listed separately. But my feeling is that the 3 members at least of the 4 are moving towards refusal.
Mm-hmm. Can we accept that, please? Accepted.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay.
If I can't win, I've got to agree with convener.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
But Councillor Kerr, I mean, despite the fact that your amendment did not have a seconder, your dissent can be recorded in the minutes if that's what you want.
Thanks, Douglas.
Is that acceptable to you?
Just for clarification, for it, it's principally the same reasons as the refusal of the report and handling, updated to reflect the policies in LDP2, and also mention, as Councillor Bowes has said, as not only the impact on the donor property at number 6, but also impact on the privacy of number 4.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, colleagues. We look forward to seeing you when you Your turn comes up again.